Everything that has life on our planet is subject to external phenomena that condition it, such as variations in the geomagnetic field that interfere with the development of plants, animals, and, of course, human beings. The Earth's own magnetic field is sometimes influenced by geomagnetic storms coming from the sun, which entails a sudden increase in the particles emitted as a result of solar flares, giving rise to alterations in the Earth's magnetic field. This directly affects all living organisms. In the 1960s, the leading researcher of biological rhythms, Frank Arthur Brown Jr., born in 1908 in Massachusetts, USA, observed that the organisms he had experimented on, including quails, snails, crabs, and mice, were highly dependent on the geomagnetic field for orientation in space and time. On the other hand, in 1978, another biologist, the Russian Alexander Petrovich Dubrov, discovered that variations in the geomagnetic field coincided with changes in the cellular activity of the organisms he had investigated. For example, cellular respiration in plants, worms, and rodents changed according to changes in the Earth's magnetism during periods of daylight and darkness. He was also able to prove that all living organisms need a geomagnetic field in order to function properly, and the absence of this field caused physical changes in the mice that resulted in alterations in their behavior. In addition, sterility or anxiety, among other factors. On the other hand, in humans, modifications of circadian rhythms, metabolism, gastrointestinal and cellular processes disorders were observed. He discovered that the electromagnetic fluctuations coming from the sun is what most influences the Earth's magnetic field, which is loaded with electrical and magnetic information, and this directly affects all living beings, including humans, so changes in solar activity have a direct impact on our body and mind in a tremendous way. To all this, we must add the research carried out by the Russian scientist Alexander Leonidovich Chizevsky, a biophysicist who founded heliobiology, which studies the effect of the sun on biology, and aeroionization, which studies the effect of air ionization on biological entities. Chizevsky used historical research techniques, historiometry, relating the 11-year solar cycle to the Earth's climate and to the mass activity of peoples. He realized that during the course of the First Great World Conflict, solar activity had skyrocketed. This made him think that perhaps this increase in solar flares was directly related to that event. Chizevsky went back 300 years in time, the date of the first records of solar activity, and compared the historical events of all those years with solar fluctuations, and discovered that there was a direct correlation between military conflicts, revolutions, uprisings, conquests, massive migrations, etc., and the minimum and maximum periods of solar activity. Solar activity is measured in 11-year periods, which is the frequency with which electromagnetic storms occur, known as the solar cycle. The number of sunspots makes it possible to quantify solar activity at any given time. Each cycle has periods of minimum and maximum activity, well marked and predictable. In each century, the general cycle of the most important historical events, called by Chizevsky historiometric, is repeated 9 times. Consequently, each of these cycles lasts on average, like the cycle of solar activity, about 11 years. Solar activity, manifested in the formation of sunspots, serves as a synchronizer of historical processes on our planet. He identified 4 prominent periods in each cycle. Each period is characterized by a different degree of excitability of the social psyche, and each lasts as long as the phases of solar activity. The first period, minimum excitability, which lasts about 3 years, corresponds to the era of minimum solar activity during the transition from one solar cycle to another. Feelings such as humility, apathy, passivity, tolerance, and peace stand out. This socio-psychological atmosphere creates the conditions for the occurrence of historical phenomena such as the end of wars, the conclusion of peace treaties, capitulations, etc. It is, therefore, the calmest period of the cycle, favorable for creation. The second period, the increase of excitability, lasts about 2 years and corresponds to the phase of increased solar activity. There is an increase in general mood, suggestibility, activity, and unity of the masses. The gradual warming of the socio-psychological atmosphere contributes to the polarization of political forces, strengthening the positions of certain parties and organizations, the emergence of political alliances, and leads to a complication of the international situation. The third period, the maximum excitability, lasts about 3 years and corresponds to the maximum of the solar activity cycle. This is the one in which we are immersed at the moment, and it will reach its highest point in July 2025. In this period, the human being reaches its climax. Confidence, optimism, determination, and enthusiasm reign in society. The influence of individuals such as political leaders, generals, speakers, on the development of social processes increases dramatically. Mass riots, popular uprisings, wars, campaigns of conquest, all these are signs of this period. The feeling of unity and solidarity eliminates all disputes and contradictions. This atmosphere contributes to social reforms, as well as to uprisings, riots, rebellions, revolutions, warlike conflicts, etc. There is an increase of teachings, including occult and esoteric ones. Manic ideas arise, for example, about the end of the world. The historiometric cycle ends with the fourth period, the fall of excitability, lasting about 3 years, marked by a decline in socio-psychological excitability. The psychological disintegration of the masses is increasing, and the need for calm and peace is more and more pronounced. Separatist tendencies intensify, military and political alliances crumble. War conflicts come to an end. Lack of unanimity prevents mass action. Gradually, the decline of excitability leads to a depressive state of society. Chizevsky said that solar activity does not control the course of history, but only affects the socio-psychological background, and mass excitability does not always turn into violence. In history, there are many examples in which that excitement was channeled by peaceful means. This knowledge could be used by certain power groups to act on these predictable solar cycles that influence human beings and thus the behavior of the masses. They can take advantage of it to initiate a conflict, execute political movements, or any other circumstance that favors their plans. Or perhaps wait for the right moment to fulfill their objectives. There are rumors linking Chizevsky to a former specialized laboratory of the USSR, whose main objective was to develop an algorithm to control the psyche of the masses. Although Chizevsky was always in trouble with the government for his solar theories, and was branded a sun worshipper by his fellow scientists. In 1942, Stalin learned of his research, and he was asked to retract his writings on solar cycles, because they contradicted Soviet theories about the reasons for the Russian revolutions of 1905 and 1917. Chizevsky refused, so he was arrested and spent 8 years in a forced labor gulag in the Ural Mountains. After his release, he spent another 8 years of Soviet rehabilitation and finally abandoned his research on solar cycles. This research leads us to the conclusion that the transformation of human consciousness is greatly influenced by the sun, which emits electrical and magnetic information that causes our field to be modified. But there are not only short cycles of 11 years, there are other longer cycles that mark the different eras of humanity and where we are heading. We have already talked about these great cycles in other videos, and it seems that they have been known since ancient times. Therefore, it is evident that there is a great cosmic plan that is far above the particular interests of a few who seek to manipulate the human being. They may succeed in short periods of time, but in the end it is those great cycles that mark our destiny.